Good morning, everyone. My name is Councillor Smith and I'm chair of this committee. I'd like to welcome you to the Joint Development Control Committee meeting taking place at 9:30 on Wednesday, the 5th of April 2023. Other members of the committee are, and please introduce yourselves when I read out your names. Councillor Carling.
Hello, present.
Councillor Gawthorpe Wood.
Morning. Present.
Councillor Pora.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Thornborough.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Bradman.
Good morning, Present Chair.
Councillor Khan.
Good morning, President.
Councillor Fain. Councillor Stobart.
Good morning, Chair, colleagues. I'm present.
And Councillor Garvey.
Present.
Good morning, I'm here, present.
Apologies from Councillor Scott, Councillor R. Williams and Councillor Flaubert and Councillor Hawkins. The officers permanently at the table for this meeting are Strategic Sites Delivery Manager Philippa Kelly, Legal Advisor Keith Barber, Committee Manager Sarah Steed, and Producer Chris Connor. Copies of the agenda can be found on the City Council's website under Committee Meetings, Minutes and Agendas. Please try and refer to page and paragraph numbers within the agenda if you're referring to a specific paragraph or plan. Please ensure that you've switched off or silenced any other devices you have so that they do not interrupt proceedings. When you're invited to address the meeting, please make sure your microphone is switched on. When you finish addressing the meeting, please turn off your microphone immediately. Speak slowly and clearly, and please do not talk over or interrupt anyone. Please can those present in the council chamber know that everything on your desk, including your laptop screen, may be broadcast at some point. The camera follows the microphone being switched on, so councillors and officers are requested to wait a couple of seconds before speaking to allow the camera to catch up. Please raise your hand if you wish to speak. Please can those participating in the meeting via the Teams meeting note the chat column is for any other purpose, that the meeting chat is neither confidential nor private and can be subject to an FOI or GDPR request. Please can meeting participants keep their microphone and cameras turned off until we come to the application you will be speaking on. The process for the consideration of the planning applications will be: the planning case officer will present the proposals and give an overview of the key issues set out in their report. Registered public speakers will be invited to have their say. There will be 3 minutes for those speaking in support and 3 minutes for those speaking against, unless I've advised otherwise. The committee manager will ring a bell when the 3-minute time period has passed. Public speakers are unable to join in with the councillor debate. The committee will then debate the item and may ask questions of the case officer. At the end of the deliberation, I will ask members to vote on the officer's recommendation by a show of hands. Moving on to agenda item 2. Please could councillors advise if they have any declarations of interest and also identify which report their declaration relates to. Councillor Carling.
Thank you. I'm a trustee of the University of Cambridge, and as they're the applicant for item 5, I'm conflicted on that, and I'll leave the chamber for that item.
Thank you. So now, Councillor Stobart.
I think you've already said, and we could default to this in the future, but I'm a member of Cambridge Cycling Campaign.
Thank you. Now move to agenda item 3. These are the minutes for the meetings of the 21st of December 2022, 15th of February 2023, and 22nd of March 2023 have been submitted to this meeting for approval. Are there any concerns or can they be approved as a correct record? Councillor Bradman.
Thank you, Chair. On our page 7, which is, I think, the minutes of 21st of December, item 5, there are 2 paragraphs, and I just wanted to check the wording in the last but one sentence, sorry, which is, it says, balance between meeting the requirements of Highway Authority for adoption and achieving a new street with character for placemaking, such as narrower widths or more plant outs. Is that right? Are we talking about planters in the road, or is that planting beds? This is Darwin Green, so it's possible Charlotte Burton might be able to advise. I imagine what we mean is intrusions into the road line in which we plant. Yeah? So it might be helpful if we referred to like planting beds or something.
Yeah, yes, that's right. We can clarify that point, as you've observed, Councillor Bradnam.
The other points members wish to raise on these minutes? In that case, they can be approved. Thank you. Agenda item 4, 21/05434/REM. Parcel BDW3, Darwin Green 1, land between Huntingdon Road and Histon Road, Cambridge. Could the Senior Planning Officer please introduce this item? Welcome, Julia.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, thank you.
I'll just share my screen. Are you able to see the title screen there?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Perfect, thank you. So this proposal is BDW on Darwin Green. The proposal is for 210 dwellings with associated open space, landscaping and infrastructure. And it is also for the part discharge of a number of outline conditions in relation to this parcel. This slide shows the location plan. As I advised, the site is part of the Darwin Green 1 outline permission, which is outlined in blue on this slide. Just a moment, I'm just going to bring up a pointer. The outline is outlined in blue here, with parcel 3 in red to the southeast. To point out the context of the site, we have Huntingdon Road to the south, with Lawrence Weaver Way as an access into the site from Huntingdon Road, and also there is Histon Road on the right of the slide, with the second access off Histon Road, which is currently the Hall Road. And on the right, you can see that BDW3 lies to the east, with the Central Park adjacent, BDW2 to the south, and BDW5 and 6 to the north. And the local centre of Darwin Green is located here. Also to note, the approved infrastructure approves areas that border Darwin Green 3, and this sets the context for the application. So of note is the green corridor immediately to the north of the parcel, the Central Park, and the primary road fronting Darwin Green 3, and also a temporary link to Windsor Road is also part of the infrastructure reserve matters. The parcel here is shown in yellow. These are some photos of the site with the arrows indicating the direction of the respective photos. This aerial view is quite current and shows the parcel currently being used for construction purposes as well. This is the timeline for the application. Prior to submission of the application, there was pre-application discussions with officers, consultees, and the Cambridge Quality Panel. The application was submitted in December 2021, and following consultation comments, it was paused to allow for BDW2 and 4 schemes to progress, and the amended scheme was received in January this year. So the design has evolved through a collaborative urban design-led pre-application and amendment process. This has resulted in a number of improvements from the master plan, including a reduction of vehicle accesses from the primary street, resulting in reduced vehicle dominance and improving permeability through the site and surrounding areas for pedestrians and cyclists. There is a realignment of the orbital cycleway in the south, removing conflict with roads, and an increase in open space throughout the parcel, and a higher quality open space. So this shows the site layout of BDW3, with the Central Park adjacent and existing neighbours also adjacent. Moving on to access, this plan shows BDW3 in yellow. On the left, you can see the orbital cycle route runs through the south of the site, and on the right picture, the primary street through Darwin Green runs in front of BDW3, between BDW3 and the Central Park. Moving within the parcel, there are 2 vehicle accesses, one off the primary street here, which feeds the majority of the parcel, secondary and tertiary streets, and in the south, one access which is accessed through BDW2 site, feeds the dwellings to the south of the orbital cycleway, which runs through here in green. So there is no through traffic for vehicles in this parcel, other than for emergency vehicles, which is supported. Looking at pedestrian cycle links, this plan shows a number of pedestrian links throughout the parcel, showing good permeability to adjoining areas, and again, access to that orbital cycleway in the south. So this slide shows a 3D image of the illustrative site layout. There is an arrow on the plan here to show you the direction that this view is taken from, because this view is going to be used in the next few slides coming forward. So you can see the allotments here and the Central Park there. The site has a number of character areas that it relates to. So there is the park frontage in red. There are the site edges to the north and to the south in orange, and there are the 1 and 2 story existing residential properties to the east in yellow and green, and the second image shows the key gateways with accesses into the site, and also in the south around the orbital cycleway have also been framed by the urban form. This is reflected in the building heights, which are shown here, moving from higher next to the Central Park and moving to 2 story as they meet the existing residents. The housing mix is shown here with the 3 apartment buildings where my pointer is now on the corners of the site and on the corner of the vehicle access into the site. There are the walk-up blocks in purple, which are also front key entrances on the Green Link and the entrance to the allotments and to Windsor Road. And this image also shows the decrease in density of the housing as we move towards the existing neighbourhood. The affordable housing is spread throughout the parcel, with many of those units benefiting from views to the car-free orbital cycle route and the Central Park frontage, and also a number of those affordable houses having rear gardens facing the allotment site. So the location of affordable housing is positive and supported. The next few slides show some typical typologies. This is the 3 and 4 story apartment blocks, of which there are 3. So all dwellings have private external amenity space. For the apartments, this is provided for with patios on the ground floor and balconies on the upper units, which can be seen here. And these spaces take advantage of the outlook onto the adjacent green spaces. So all dwellings in this parcel meet the internal nationally described space standards, including these apartments. This slide shows the park frontage houses, which have 3 and 2 story elements to them. And private external amenity space is provided here through rear gardens and also through front first floor terraces. The 3-story walk-up blocks, known as XXX type, are 3 blocks, are a block of 3 flats, each with their own entrance, which can be shown down here in this section. Private amenity space is provided with patios and balconies, and again, these units meet the internal space standards. There is also a duplex type, which is a 2-story walk-up. Again, each unit with their own access, 1 unit on the ground floor, 1 unit on the first floor. Again, private amenity space is with patios or balconies, and some also have small gardens. And again, they meet the internally described space standards. Then we have a 4-bedroom detached house. And these units have generous rear gardens. They can be seen along the boundary with existing neighbours. There is also a flat over garage typology present on the Muse Street in the south and next to the apartment buildings on the park frontage. Again, private amenity space is provided by balconies to the front of these units. And finally, in the Muse Street in the south, it also contains 3 small 2-bedroom houses, specially designed with lower eaves in this area and private rear gardens, and these meet the space standards as well. So coming on to some images of the layout and the houses on the scheme. This slide shows the park frontage. And the primary street has a formal frontage as required by the design code, with the apartment blocks as marker buildings and with variation provided through the 3 and 2-story elements of those park frontage houses. The secondary street features detached 3-story housing. Going through to further through the secondary streets, that you see 2-story houses with some 2 and 3-story walk-up blocks as marker buildings in this space. And on the right, the image here shows the entrance to the allotment parks with these marker buildings on the corner. In the tertiary streets, there are a number of cul-de-sacs, and these feature detached two-storey houses, and they are shared surfaces and have close layouts, creating a sense of community in these areas. Finally, this is the Tertiary Muse Street, located in the south of the parcel, and it has the smallest typologies due to its relationship with the neighbouring Windsor Road properties. So moving on, these site sections just show the gradual decrease in height from west to east as the parcel in the west fronts the Central Park, and in the east fronts the existing neighbourhood of two-storey dwellings, and then the reverse taken from the northern boundary. Through the course of the application, cycle parking was greatly improved. The approach is the same that was secured on the BDW4 site. So we have apartments providing cycle parking on the ground floor with cargo bike space and also a maintenance area. In the walk-up blocks, cycle parking is provided near to front doors, and within garages, cycle parking is provided to the side of car parking and meets the policy dimensions required. And in the houses, a split approach has been provided with highly convenient cycle storage to the front of houses, and then a second store provided in the rear garden, close to the back of the house. So this provides a good range of options for residents and is highly supported. The image on the right shows what these cycle stores would look like. They match door colours and they provide a green roof as well. This slide shows some of the positive sustainability and accessibility improvements provided on the parcel. So 180 homes would be built to future home standards with air source heat pumps and PV panels. The remaining 30 to be built to Part L 2021 with PV panels and future proofing to enable future installation of air source heat pumps. All dwellings are dual aspect. There are lift accesses in all apartment blocks, and 94% of affordable homes meet M42, and the remaining 6% allow for immediate occupation by a wheelchair user. There is also EV charging secured by condition. The scheme provides a series of well-located and connected public open spaces. This slide shows where they are located throughout the parcel. So the allotments in the centre, there's a formal park in the south, the Windsor Road Park in the south also, play along the way spaces, an allotment arrival park, a pocket park, replacing one of the original master plan vehicle accesses, and then two small parks in the north connecting to the green corridor there. The outline master plan requires 0.87 hectares of open space, and 0.97 has been provided, which exceeds this requirement and is welcomed. In terms of play space, this image on the left shows BDW3 is ideally located adjacent to the Central Park, which provides a number of sport and recreation facilities, including football, cricket pitches, tennis courts, and a sports pavilion, and also a trim trail. And there are also additional play spaces to the north and to the south of the parcel as well. On the image on the right, can be seen the 5 laps that have been provided within BDW3. The outline requires 3 laps to be provided and 5 have been provided, and this shows a good spread of play spaces throughout the site. Details of the play itself will be submitted to discharge outline condition 10. Looking at blue and green infrastructure, a number of benefits have been provided here and assessed through green streets, through tree planting, through additional biodiversity features such as bee bricks and log piles and swift boxes, and through permeable paving and rain gardens as well. This has resulted in a well thought out series of open spaces linked by green streets and with good permeability into surrounding areas. I'm just pointing out the formal park location and the Windsor Road Park location in the south, which I'll come to in some detail in a moment. So this slide shows a couple of the open space areas, a northern park adjoining the green corridor to the north, and the Pocket Park Green Link, which has replaced one of the master plan vehicle accesses. So this shows well-designed areas that also provide links through to the surrounding areas. The slide shows the allotments with access from the secondary street and also accesses from each side here. There's an allotment arrival park and a community area here with raised beds and a community garden area, good cycle parking and delivery and parking in this area here. This shows a couple of images of what that allotment arrival park might look like, and this is a great advantage of the scheme and will create a sense of community in this area. So as I said, there's two areas in the south, the formal park and Windsor Road Park, that have received some comments that I just want to run through now. So firstly, the formal park in the south, this is located in an ideal area and presents an arrival space at the entrance to the parcel. And it's located at a meeting point of multiple paths from different directions. This image here shows some of those directions that people might be coming from, and it also shows the orbital cycle route separate in orange. So questions have been raised about access into the site and the safety of the lap, which from the plan here you can see faintly outlined here. The lower diagram to the left is from the Sustainable Drainage Plan, and it shows that there is a surface channel running alongside the pedestrian pathway, and there's also a swale which will both provide some elements of safety for the lap that is contained within this area. Additionally, when the park was designed, there were some elements, the tree here that I'm circling and cycle parking over here, which were provided to act to slow people down through this pathway as well. So this park is supported. And these are some images of what the features of this park may look like, noting particularly the surface channel. Looking at the Windsor Road Park now, it's located at the entrance to Windsor Road, and it accommodates the orbital cycleway and pedestrian access as well, as you can see in pink and grey here. The design code requires a park in this junction for surveillance of this connection and to create an inviting entrance to the parcel. This design also provides permeability into side streets, as you can see where my pointer is indicating now, and as this drawing on the left indicates with arrows. So comments have been received about conflict between cyclists and pedestrians in this area, and I've just highlighted in yellow the event, which is an area of contrasting paving, which will draw the user's attention to the shared surface and the crossing of paths in this location. And this is something that's been discussed with landscape and highway consultees and is supported. So as I said, comments have also been raised about the accesses through to the tertiary streets. So these do provide permeability through to BDW2 and also the allotments. And additionally, because the layout in this area is set around the Car-Free Orbital Cycleway to provide surveillance and an active frontage to the cycleway. The dwellings in this area have front elevations facing onto this parkway, and this creates a strong positive frontage to the park and overlooking. The trade-off in that is that services to these dwellings must be provided to the rear, and this has necessitated links for these residents. So I've put here, added some red and orange arrows showing how residents will be using this area for putting out their bins, and also access to a communal bin store, which can just be seen off to the right here, and also access to their designated car parking spaces. So this shows that the areas will receive a fair amount of activity and are required by the layout of this park. In addition, this is the landscape or ground floor plan of the area, and these pink arrows indicate windows and doors that face onto these areas, providing good natural surveillance to them as well. And I've just included one further plan of the first floor layout, and this shows in pink a number of windows facing onto these areas, and also in blue arrows the balconies which overlook these areas as well. And just finally, an image of what the park would look like, a CGI image, and it shows a good level of surveillance from the surrounding properties and quite an open park. And for these reasons, the park design is supported. There have also been objections raised regarding securing the orbital cycleway to prevent future vehicle access through to Windsor Road, which is required by the design code. So the layout has ensured a 4.8 metre cycle and pedestrian way in this location, and condition 27 on the amendment sheet is recommended to retain the 4.8 metre cycle and pedestrian route, and also the private frontages of these plots here to protect against future vehicle access. Turning to refuse, much of the parcel has street front refuse collection, and amendments were made throughout the application process to bring drag distances within the recap guidance. So this is the refuse strategy in the north and in the south. So in the south of the site, there are some areas of non-compliance, which occurs mainly around this orbital cycle route, which is car-free, as I said. So there are wider placemaking benefits achieved in having this car-free space. And so, again, this requires services to be to the rear, and there you can see in orange the refuse vehicle tracking, and this only allows vehicles to get so close to this area, and this has necessitated some longer drag distances in this area. On balance, it's considered acceptable in this instance. And finally, just looking at the existing neighbours to the site along the eastern boundary and a little bit in the south and north. So the layout has been carefully assessed in terms of residential amenity of these neighbours. In the northeast of the site, the proposal is not considered to substantially impact on neighbours. This diagram here shows the distances to Caverson Court residents and residents at the top of Tavistock Road, and there's a minimum of 29 metres separation between properties in this location, and there is also going to be a green area planted out that was approved through the infrastructure reserve matters that will contain trees in this area, providing a buffer to this property. The image on the right shows the boundary with Tavistock Road, and how the applicant has assessed and decided and created the layout to reflect those relationships. So there's an assessment of the back-to-back relationships in this area, and there's a minimum of 27 metres back-to-back distance, which adequately respects privacy. The layout of the houses and also removal of windows on some of the elevations has been undertaken to reflect outbuildings in the gardens of these Tavistock Road properties, some of them, to further respect privacy and ensure no overlooking, and this is acceptable. Moving downwards through the site, there have been objections raised regarding impact on 12 Stratfield Close, and the objections relate to proposed dwellings looking into the windows of Stratfield Close property and affecting privacy. So the applicant has considered these comments and rearranged the layout of the houses in this location to create a strategic gap. This is 12 Stratfield Close here, and there has been a strategic gap located through these houses, which you can see in the CGI image, provides a gap here and assists in reducing any overlooking. The back-to-back distance from the closest plot is 26 metres, as can be seen here and in the image at the top, and this is not considered, so this is considered acceptable in terms of privacy, and there's no overbearing or overlooking concerns. Moving further south, the scheme proposes dwellings with rear elevations facing at 90 degrees to two properties at the end of Windsor Road, number 100 and number 111. For number 100, the separation distances are shown here of at least 12 metres, and the area immediately to the rear of number 100 Windsor Road is going to be a landscaped area with parking beyond, and for these reasons there is no unacceptable impact on this property. And finally, for number 111 Windsor Road, comments have been received on the initial proposal about impacts on this property, and throughout the application process the applicant has undertaken consultation, and amendments were created to create again gaps through the built form in this area, and a lowering of the eaves and lowering of roof tiles down onto the elevations of these blocks to reduce the presence of these buildings, and also windows from first floor have been removed from these elevations to protect privacy, and these adequately respect the amenity of 111 Windsor Road here. So the scheme has positively evolved through the pre-application and application processes. The proposed layout provides a parcel with reduced vehicle dominance and a greater permeability for pedestrians and cyclists. The orbital cycleway has been provided with a car-free route, which is an improvement that's welcomed. More open space has been provided and of a higher quality. Homes are more sustainable and accessible than the outline requirements, and all provide private external amenity space, meet internal space standards, and provide convenient cycle parking. The amended proposal has also made improvements to the impact on existing neighbours, and these are acceptable. Concerns regarding the functionality and safety of the orbital cycleway and Windsor Road Park have also been addressed through amendments. These benefits are balanced against the removal of one tree in the north and some non-compliance with the recap waste guidance, and for these reasons the scheme is supported. So just before I turn to the recommendation, I wanted to just include a slide on the amendments that have been included on the amendment sheet for this application, noting some revised plans. An additional condition 27 to secure the orbital cycleway, the distance, the width of the orbital cycleway is 4.8 metres, and some minor amendments to conditions 9, 23 and 26. and a correction on number 6 of a cycle parking plan that had an old version in it. So those are the amendments. So the recommendation 1 is to approve the application subject to conditions and informatives with authority delegated to officers to carry out minor amendments prior to issuing the planning permission. And recommendation 2 is to approve, refuse, or partially discharge the outlined conditions according to the recommendations for each condition that's set out in the table below and in the committee report. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. I'm now going to ask the committee manager, Sarah Stee, to read out the letters from 2 objectors, and then we'll invite Chris Fry of BDW Cambridgeshire to speak via Teams. Thank you, Sarah.
Committee of Windsor Road Residents Association is pleased that a number of its concerns regarding the BDW3 Reserve Matters application have been addressed. We have some questions about others. Number 1, Windsor Road residents request that conditions be set to secure the width of the pedestrian cycleway running northwest between Windsor Road and the primary road south of Central Park at no greater than 4.8 metres, and to ensure that the active spaces and porches along the pedestrian cycleway are preserved and altered. Reason, to ensure that the route remains free of motor traffic in perpetuity. Point 2, please amend condition 26, bollard design and management, to make specific reference to the folding bollards at the emergency crossing for fire trucks, and also to the permanent bollards at the junction of the pedestrian cycleway with Windsor Road. Reason, to ensure that the route remains free of motor traffic. Point 3, we request the committee has shown the relevant submitted drawings of the transition area between the pedestrian cycleway and Windsor Road, so that the highway officers can provide an explanation of how the colour coding will relieve the conflict between pedestrians and cyclists travelling in both directions. Reason, to ensure the safe passage of all at the transition. Point 4, when the secondary school in DG3 opens, Windsor Road Park may become an area where pupils gather. Has this been considered in the design of the park? Reason, to preserve the amenity for residents facing Windsor Road Park and also for those using the pedestrian cycleway. Point 5, small children from lap 01 running across the diagonal cycle path crossing the park in the northwest of BDW3 will be a hazard to themselves and to cyclists. Reference to drawing 2756-114. They will also be exposed to dogs and their excreta unless a method of keeping them separate is employed. We request appropriate fencing or railings. Reason, child and cyclist safety. Point 6, when will the temporary pedestrian cycle route be constructed in order to comply with the Section 106 agreement? That's the end of the first statement. The second statement is a representation from 12 Stratfield Close. The current proposals cause a large intrusion on my privacy, being the end homeowner on Stratfield Close. The consultations between the developers and neighbourhood recognised there was an intrusion of privacy on residents facing onto this development. As a result, the allotments were introduced to this area in the design stage to address the intrusion. So since the mid-2000s, this has been my understanding of the design intention. Now I find the submitted details design clearly identify 2 wide-fronted style houses across the rear of my garden, looking into my bedroom windows. This is a great intrusion on my living space, both internal and external, and clearly goes against what was recognised as an issue at the time. It is unreasonable to have site plans at very small scale, so that when downloaded to view and comment on, everything is an unidentifiable blur. It is only when more detailed drawings were released did this become apparent. This meeting is to look at detailed massing and quality of design, and I feel the above infringement means the application as it stands is lacking. There are houses with considerable length gardens, protected privacy-wise by having the allotments, and 12 Stratfield Close has the smallest depth of rear garden yet has 2 houses overlooking it instead of the allotments promised. This cannot be allowed to proceed, and a simple redesign would mean they do not extend across and look into my property. That's the end of that statement, Chair.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Can we now introduce Chris Fry of BDW Cambridgeshire? Chris, you have 3 minutes, and as you have form, it's 3 minutes. Okay, thank you. You're mute.
Can you hear me now okay?
We can, thank you, Chris.
I do apologise. So, by the way, my name is Chris Fry. I'm the planning manager for BDW Homes Cambridgeshire. My role today is to briefly speak on behalf of support of the application. So, as you've seen from Julia's very detailed presentation, we are intending to build 210 dwellings here, which 84 will be affordable. A lot of the scheme has drawn reference from my lessons learned for BDW4 in terms of what we found from the design workshops. The walk-up units and ground floor apartments have private amenity space, and the quality of such space is not being undermined or being overlooked or detrimentally affected by any overbearing structures. In regards to external space, all dwellings have external amenity space commensurate to the size. As Julie has already touched on, like BDW4, we're committing to 94% of the affordable housing dwellings to Cat 2 standards, with the remaining 6% built to Cat 3. This is over and above the outlined mission requirements, and again shows a continued improvement in terms of accessibility standards over the recently approved BDW2 scheme. Barratt Day Wilson Homes is also committed on this scheme to an increased percentage of dwellings that will benefit from air source heat pumps. As you've already seen, 180 dwellings will have air source heat pumps when they're built. All other dwellings will have the ability to install the heat pumps at a later stage. We've also incorporated the same cycle strategy as BW4, in that we're advocating the split solution with some front cycle stores and others at the back, but the cycle stores will have a green roof. In regards to waste and recycling, 2 workshops have been held with the waste and recycling team. We've taken on board and amended the scheme to ensure, where possible, we've reduced drag distance for the operatives to no more than 10 metres. We've also calculated bin storage capacity in relation to the flat blocks and walk-up units. These actually exceed the SPD requirements. There are a few examples as stated in the officer's report where the drag distance for the occupier exceeds the 25-metre drag distance. However, officers' comments are that in order to achieve a variety of streetscapes and house typology, there needs to be some flexibility in drag distance. We are committing to EV charging, and the same condition that's been imposed on BDW4 will also be imposed on this particular consent. Turning to existing neighbour amenity, we've had extensive work taking into account neighbour amenity, and we've broken up the massing of the properties along the southern and along the southeast and northeast boundary. This has been achieved by altering road layouts, driveway positions, roof forms, and internal layouts of properties. And it's now considered that through removal of permitted development rights, these neighbours on Windsor Road will not be detrimentally affected in terms of future extensions and alterations without the scrutiny of a planning application. The Hoadley Road neighbours referenced in the report has a long rear garden, and given the scale and the sizing of the proposed dwelling in relation to this neighbour, there should be no detrimental impact upon their amenity. Neighbours in Stratfield Close, Caversham and Tavistock are adequately separated from the proposal as referenced in detail in the officer's report. A construction management plan is being prepared and will be submitted as part of a discharge condition, which will ensure the LPA has control over the construction activities on the site from causing undue noise and dust. Open space, parks and informal meeting areas, allotments will provide open space and recreation facilities. And you've seen that we've done a lot of work to the Windsor Road area, and we've also removed the need for a vehicle and conception of an emergency access road through the area. And it's amending the surface and colour of the materials, resulting in a more coherent design for the parcel and one's advocating
2 minutes is
sustainable
up,
forward
sorry.
travel. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. A lot of changes before from the preceding parcels. I'm sure you wanted to showcase them all to the committee, but they're all fully reported
Thank you.
to us in the previous application. So thanks for your presentation. We now move to member questions. Could all those people who want to ask questions please indicate? Okay, I'll just keep your hands up, please, and I'll shout your names out. And so it's going to be Councillor Bradman, Fane, Dobert, Thornborough, Ora, Northrop Wood, children want to ask a question at some point? No, then we'll take us. Reserve your rights. Okay, thank you very much. I think, though, it might be helpful if anybody has submitted questions before, in advance of the meeting, can we have those answered first, please? Would that be acceptable? Who's got those questions? Has Julie got the questions?
Yeah, I do have the questions. Should I share them on screen or just read them out?
You can put them on screen, if you've got them on screen, and just deal with them, please, okay?
Sure, just a moment.
That's not going to work, Julie. If you could just read them out to us, please.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Thank you.
There were questions received by from Councillor Smith in advance, and they are question 1 for clarity and avoidance of doubt.
Julia,
sorry.
Julia, don't deal with my questions 1 or 2, please, because they've been dealt with within the amendments.
Okay, thank you.
Just 3 and 4. Okay, thank you.
So question 3 is to ensure the LAP provides a safe place for children. Could an informative be added to informative 2 that the developer is advised details of the LAP to be submitted through discharge of outline condition 10 youth facility and children's play provision to protect the play area from dogs, cyclists riding through the LAP by layout, fencing and gates. I have, to answer this question, I did provide some information about how the layout of the park and drainage features provide protection in this area. But I'm also equally happy for an addition to be made to that informative as requested. So question 4 relates to the functions of the gateway area around the Windsor Road Park and the Orbital Cycleway. Sorry, just a moment. And this area, the primary functions of this area are to provide a safe transition for routes for pedestrians and cyclists between the Orbital Cycleway and the end of the public highway at Windsor Road, and also to provide a quiet landscaped amenity space for residents of dwellings facing the gateway area. The proposed routes to the Muse Street conflict with these primary roles. Could a condition amendment be made under Condition 1 plans compliance to require amendments to the relevant application documents as follows? The design and general layout of the gateway area between Windsor Road and BDW3 is submitted in the application documents to exclude cycle and pedestrian routes to the Muse Streets on both sides of the Orbital Cycleway in the interests of highway safety and protecting residential amenity. So to answer that question, again, this area was covered with a specific slide in my presentation showing the functionality of those accesses through to the Muse for the existing residents, and also the natural surveillance provided by the built form and the frontage of these dwellings onto this area. So if this, that's my response to that question, but it may be discussed further.
On to Councillor Porter's questions, please.
And Councillor Porter's questions. First, the phasing conditions that have not yet been met relating to the outline application. Whilst I appreciate officers' suggestion that these could attract much weight, could you cover what leverage remains for the LPA as this is the last parcel to be approved and therefore last to be built out and sold, reducing the incentive to complete the outstanding issues covered by phasing conditions. Is there anything in the reserve matters today which allow stop points if new phasings are not agreed? For example, not being able to market properties until current breaches and revised terms are agreed in full. So to respond to that question, I believe Charlotte may be able to respond to that one.
Yes, thanks, Julia. Just on the matter of the status of the current Section 106 compliance and monitoring, as we've set out in the committee report on this one for this parcel and also for BDW4, any compliance with the Section 106 triggers, while it is a material consideration, we have given it limited weight, and I don't think that there's any further breaches that warrant more weight for BDW3 than we considered for the BDW4 application. So I'd recommend that members take the same approach as for that previous parcel. Having said that, monitoring and compliance with the Section 106, I would say, is a separate matter that officers are following up with the applicant, and we can certainly provide further updates to the committee on that if necessary.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Charlotte.
Julia.
Thank you. Moving on to the second question, plot 209 is referenced by local residents. Can we ensure this is covered and the particular citing in relation to existing properties and the loss of the tree as part of the presentation? So I did not show the loss of the tree in the presentation itself, but I do have an additional slide showing this that I can share briefly. Are you able to see that slide now? Excellent. So this shows proposed plot 209 on the north eastern boundary of BDW3 is shown here. I previously showed this in relation to the back-to-back distances to the existing properties on Tavistock Road and the existing properties on Cavison Court here. This plan to the right shows the approved infrastructure permission, which has a planting green corridor area proposed in between plot 209 and the houses at Cavison Court. So this shows that trees and shrub planting will be a feature of this area and provide a buffer between Cavison Court here and plot 209, which is down here in the south. The red circle indicates the one tree that is sought to be removed from the plot. And in the officer report, that is discussed the balance of removing that tree versus the benefits of the other trees planted throughout BDW, including in this infrastructure reserve matters for the green corridor. There's two more questions, just a moment. The third question relates to letterboxes. Can we have a condition that these must be accessible for flatted blocks and not behind outer doors? So in response to this, this only affects apartment block, the 3 apartment blocks, as all other walk-ups have individual doors with letterboxes available. So the approach throughout the Darwin Green parcels has been for letterboxes to be accessible at the front of apartment buildings and to be designed to secure by design standards. And so this is what we would expect ongoing through the BDW3 site. In addition to there is an informative regarding letterboxes, and in addition to that informative could be made to include this detail. And question 4 non-adopted areas, is there something in the management plan to ensure fair charges for maintenance of these areas outside city or council control? And in response to this, the Section 106 requires service charges for affordable homes to be agreed with the council. Those are the ends of the questions I received in advance.
Thank you, Julia. Councillor Badman, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. So these are not in any particular order, so I apologise for dodging about a bit. Allotments, the arrival park, this is items, paragraph 16.11 on page 59, and it talks about the arrival park. I don't have an allotment, but I have lots of friends who do, and the most useful thing that they find for this communal building, sorry, not a building, but building community, is to have an open green grass lawn space that they can just put up a gazebo. I'm sure others may have better information than me, but it looked rather built to me, and the suggestion of a nuttery and planters sounded lovely, but could we please make space for just a green space so that they can put up a gazebo or have a barbecue in the summer? The second thing was, I thought I saw, and I might be wrong, that there are some places where there are ground floor only elements, and I just wanted to check whether condition 9, if there are any like that, could we strengthen condition 19 on page 100, which refers to withdrawal of permitted development rights for roofs, to say that if you've got a terrace element that you're using as a garden or an open space, you can't then build on it. And I would suggest we add that to balconies. In other words, that you can't make it into a room. The park at the southwest corner, so the third thing is the park at the southwest corner of the site, which is called the formal park, is bisected by a bicycle route. And I did just wonder whether it would be possible to reorientate that slightly so that the grass area was in the northeast portion and the cycle route went round the southwest, so that it wasn't, so that the play area is not just got 100-mile-an-hour bicycles running across it. The fourth item was in the condition that's been asked to be put in by the resident. I would support that, but also could we clarify in the wording that we've got that it's no more than 4.8 metres for that boundary, because it just says that the roadway, the pedestrian cycle route, will be 4.8 metres. And when people come back to that in years to come, they may not realise that the purpose of that was not to make it a minimum of 4.8, but that was the maximum so that cars shouldn't go through. So if we could just clarify that, please. Thank you.
Julia, do you want to respond to those?
Yeah, okay. So through you, Chair, regarding the allotment, arrival park, or perhaps the allotment, open space, community space in general, there is a request to include an open green grassed lawn area. I don't know whether it's helpful to bring up that plan again. I'll just find it 1 second. So these are the allotments here, and it includes an allotment arrival park that I've just failed to properly include at the top here. This area provides for some raised beds and orchard, and there is seating areas proposed here as well, and also open space surrounding the communal shed in the centre. So at this stage, there isn't open space proposed necessarily, but in saying that, these allotment beds themselves are just an indicative layout, and so when the City Council plans those out, there is a possibility that some of that area could be retained for open space uses as well. Second question regarding removal of permitted development for roofs and for balconies. I may need to just, oh, Charlotte is going to help with that one.
Yeah. My suggestion, and Keith might want to come into this, is that any extension on a first floor terrace or a balcony would count as a 2-storey extension. And Julia's already recommended condition 20, which is the removal of permitted development rights for 2-storey extensions. So I believe that would be covered, but Keith might want to just confirm that for us.
I'd confirm that is the situation, or would be.
The Southwest Corner Formal Park was very much in line with my question, so I think we can deal that in the debate. So, and then on the amended condition, I think it's, I can't remember the number now. This is about no more than 4.8 metres. I don't see a problem with that. Okay. So.
Yeah, no, I agree
Yep.
with that
Yep.
also.
Okay.
That's condition 27. Yep.
Yep, condition 27, that's fine, thank you for that. And then Councillor Bradman, the point about the allotment, it appears that the allotments will be managed by the City Council, is that correct?
Well, maybe
That's correct, yes.
So,
could people be involved in the planning of the layout of that to just
right,
with a suggestion?
I think that's a commendable idea. And I think we need to advise our open spaces people about that process. I think it's something that Councillor Thornbury previously mentioned at this committee in respect of the development of allotment. So yes, we'll take that away, but it's
Just
out
that it
with
looked
this.
rather built, and sometimes just a plain piece of grass might do the job.
So we'll do that. Thank you. Go on to Councillor Fane now, please.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Fry referred to the provision of ASHP in all but 30, can you hear me? All but 30 of the units. And the Sustainability Officer's comments of last January confirmed that that provision will include sizing of radiators and, where appropriate, of water tanks. I just wondered whether consideration has been given, could be given to district schemes which can be more efficient, and where ground source is also used can provide for cooling, which I think is a factor that may be more important in the future, as well as heating. And also why, if it is worth installing ASHP to 180 of the units, is there any particular reason, other than obviously cost saving, why it can't be done for the remaining 30, bearing in mind that although there is provision for ASHP to be systems to be changed in the future, that will involve significant cost to the then owners. And just for reference, that is paragraph 1914 on page 77 and subsequent.
Thank you. Julia, Charlotte, who's taking this one?
I can answer that, Chair. Regarding the air source heat pumps and the possibility for ground source heat pumps, that is something that we are considering on schemes going forward. But for this parcel in particular, we have a lot of individual homes, which better suit the air source heat pump individual units. But that is something for the bigger schemes with more apartment blocks that is being considered by us going forward on other parcels. So that point is taken on board. And regarding why the remaining 30 aren't proposed to include air source heat pumps from the initial stages, all I can comment is that the provision of air source heat pumps is over and above the outline requirements that is required on Darwin Green, and so the 180 units that will be provided with air source heat pumps is a good advantage, and that measures will be put in place to make installation of those heat pumps in the remaining 30 easier in the future.
Yeah, so I think it's an issue I wholly agree with every point that you've made, but the developer is not required to go gas-free until 2025, which is a regrettable act by the government, but we are where we are, and you'll have noticed that as we've progressed through the different phases on this application, we've secured more and more gas-free houses. So, and this is going to be the best performing in terms of energy performance of all of them to date. So we're making progress, but unfortunately not as much as we would like to have seen. Councillor Stobart.
Thank you, Chair, and this is a comment rather than a question. So I was looking at the traceability of the recommendations of the quality panel through to what we've seen today. And I just picked one example. I mean, there are several. They're on page 109 of the agenda pack in the second half of the page. And just going to the last sentence, consideration must be given to all age groups, including where teenagers can meet up. Not everyone will be able to cycle to Sainsbury's, which is a good and true statement, but I think the preceding paragraph is nicely addressed by that kind of entrance parkway that Julia presented so carefully. So my concern was this recommendation wasn't explicitly addressed in the responses. I can't find that response. And so my question was, how do we ensure the traceability of what the quality panel says all the way through to what we are discussing today? Can it be made more visible? And then if I could just come back, and I will ask a small question, in regard to this particular example under the community title, did we address this properly? Because the language used by the quality panel was a must. And, you know, if we're now strictly regarding must as something that is almost obligatory, did that get handled correctly in the process? Sure.
Julian Schroeder, do you want to respond to how you translate recommendations from the quality panel into the pre-app discussions and amendments that are made during those stages of the process?
Yeah, through you, Chair. The applicant has provided a response document which responds to comments received throughout the application process. I don't have that section just in front of me at the moment, but that is one of the ways that we trace comments that are received through the application process and ensure that they are covered. And I don't know whether I should respond directly to the query about spaces for older children, but that was, I think, mentioned in my presentation, that the proximity to the Central Park provides good provision for sports and other recreation and a trim trail. And additionally, the outline application for Darwin Green 2 and 3, which is to be to the west of Darwin Green 1, I understand that there is going to be some provision for older children in that parcel as well. Yeah, I hope that helps.
So if you'd like to circulate the applicant's response document, so it'll give Councillor Stobart the opportunity to see how that process has worked.
Sorry, Chair, the response is on page 119.
It's in appendix. It's in the report. It's appendix 2. So it's in there, Councillor Stobart, for you to look at. But your general point about making the play areas and open spaces suitable to all generations of children, and well, by age and by gender, has been noted and has been carried forward by the officers in their discussions across all planning applications.
Chair, if I could just add, that traceability might be improved by some kind of numbering system or some reference system, so that we could actually, there was, quotes, an audit trail through the process.
Duly noted. Thank you. The Thorpe, please.
One of the things we found on other sort of large building developments was actually to do with the build quality. So I'm not specifically saying the build quality in Darwin Green is questionable, but the more insulated a building is, the more important the quality is, because if there's a gap in highly insulated buildings, you're much more prone to get mould and damp. And is there any way for maybe now or going in thinking in the future about post-occupancy feedback and energy in use information to feedback to us and developers to, I think if there was post-occupancy feedback a year or two later, they may be more careful about the build quality during the process. And the other thing is really important when we have new forms of heating is really clear information and instructions for people using the buildings. Otherwise it's done wrong and there's complaints about a high utility cost. Another point is, following on from Councillor Stobart's, is the play areas seem really well designed from what you've shown us, but I think skateboarding is taking off in this area, and it would be really good if the landscaping could be skateboard friendly, so not necessarily space set aside, but allowing for skateboarding within all of the landscaping and paths we got. The other thing I find a bit disappointing is we're not moving to underground bin storage as in Eddington. I think we should try and get away from wheelie bins because they clog up the pavements and it's causing real problems for mobility issues. And if we have another option, it'd be great if we could see that coming forward. So my main questions are, we need options for people to move towards non-car ownership, in which means many more shared EV car spaces, and have they been allowed, and how many have been allowed, and is it designed so that more people could give up their cars and move towards a shared car in the future? Have we taken into account drop-offs for deliveries, which is increasing greatly, and also are there collection points on the site for deliveries if residents are away during the day? We get that in some places. And finally, for 100 Windsor Road and 111 Windsor Road, where we were talking about the acceptable distance to the new buildings, would we be proposing to remove permitted development rights so that they don't build an extension to their homes to decrease the distance between the new buildings and the existing? Thank you.
You there for you to get through, Julia. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I think there were a few comments just at the beginning regarding building quality and heating, which I think are noted. And also regarding skateboarding within the landscape, which I haven't specifically considered. So I'm not sure if I can respond to that just at the moment. There was also a comment or a query about underground bins, and I think that's something that will need to be worked through with the refuse team as well, because I understand that's quite a complex undertaking, and probably not something that was considered for this older outline Darwin Green permission, but something that we can be looking at going forward on other parcels. Regarding EV charging spaces, there is a condition recommended to secure EV charging for all houses, and also for 50% of the on-road parking spaces as well. So that has been provided. There was also a question about whether people can give up their car parks in order to have shared spaces. And I would say that quite a few of the car parks provided on this scheme are beside the houses and the back gardens, and so there is an option there for people to give up one of their car parking spaces and increase their own amenity space in many of those locations as well. And there are a number of visitor car parking spaces provided on street throughout the parcel, evenly spread out throughout the parcel, to help with visitors and with delivery vehicles as well. But there is no communal collection space for deliveries in this parcel, which potentially reflects the lower density housing in this parcel. And finally, regarding permitted development for the dwellings adjacent to 100 and 111 Windsor Road, I believe the permitted development rights for those plots will have been removed through the recommended conditions. I'm not sure if Charlotte can help any further on that one, but I'm just trying to bring them up now.
We certainly did consider that issue, and I think where along that boundary with the existing neighbours, where amendments have been made during the course of the application that Julia described, such as the removal of windows and separation distances, we've used conditions to try and make sure that those remain and that there aren't further changes in the future. So if it is not, there is certainly a condition that as I referred to before, removes permitted development rights for all plots for two-storey extensions. So to remove any potential overlooking from first floor windows to numbers 101, 100 and 111 Windsor Road. If there's a concern about single-storey extensions that we haven't already considered, then we can have a look at that. But I would suggest that the main impact would be from two-storey extensions.
Yeah, it might be
and that's already covered.
Councillor Bradman.
Sorry, it might be helpful in that. I think part of the problem is condition 18 is very explicit, but it's not easy for me to know which of those plot numbers are the ones that most likely, this is on page 100, because there are some with permitted development rights removed for windows, some that are alterations to roof at 19, and condition 20 refers to two-storey extensions. But I don't know which plot numbers are most likely to impact 100 and 111 Windsor Road. So if...
Yeah, we need to refer to the plot numbers to ensure that there is...
exactly.
So that's to make sure that the condition is kind of accurate, but Julia and I have been through that process of checking the plot numbers, and we will check them again as we review the conditions to ensure that those plots are included, but we have been mindful of those plots already.
So I think Councillor Bradman makes a good point. If you could just insert which properties they relate to,
so that ordinary people can understand what that's about. So that would be helpful, because it is quite a difficult job to go through all the documents to find the relevant plot numbers and where they're located. It'd just be helpful. Just be helpful, like a plain English thing.
It might be easier, if I may say so, Chair, to put it in the reason that plots X
I was going
and
to suggest
Y
that.
are most likely to affect 111 Windsor Road.
Yeah,
Something like that.
That's helpful. Thank you for that. That'll deal with that.
I can also refer to a specific drawing that has those plot numbers on it, so that attention is drawn to one drawing that can be referred to when reading that condition.
The 100 and 111 Windsor Road, I do think the single-storey extensions could be problematic because it brings the living space closer to the applicant's garden, so it's the coming and goings within a habitable space is brought forward if there is an extension. So I'm concerned about that.
We can look to put on an additional condition removing single-storey extensions to those plots, if that's what the committee would like to do.
It would.
I'd support that.
Okay. Have we all done on Councillor Thornborough? Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to, I haven't in my mind, but I just wondered if anybody has got any ideas about whether an additional condition might help 12 Stratfield Close. I found it hard to get my head around the plans that we were shown for that. So I just wondered if members felt that was all okay, or whether members felt we needed to put in a condition.
When we'll have a break, and then perhaps we can the officers can think about and address that during the break. Councillor Bradnam, for Thornborough, you all done. So I can move on then to Councillor Thorpe. Thank you.
Well, you'll be relieved that most of the questions I had have been answered. So, just some minor ones on the allotments. Now, there seem to be some dedicated parking to the allotments. Is that the case, and how will that be enforced? Can I just check the allotment shed, communal shed? Does that has bike parking, but does it have loos? So that's a question. And then one more thing on the EV chargers, and this might be something for the future plots, but I would like to see provision of fast chargers as well as the 7 kilowatts of the slow chargers. That would obviously require someone to manage those. So those are my questions. Thank you.
Julia?
Thank you, Chair. Regarding the parking at the allotments, there are 3 car parking spaces provided at the entrance to the allotments. One of those is accessible parking, and given that they are within the confines of the allotments, I would imagine that they would be managed by the City Council managing the allotments. And regarding the community building in the allotments, there is toilets proposed for that building. The internal layout of that building is not to be approved in this application and will come forward at a later stage. But there is toilets planned in that facility. And the third question was regarding EV charging. I'm not sure if anybody can help me with answering that question because I'm not too familiar with the types of EV charging available.
I can help a little bit. Julia, and I think really our answer is that what's proposed here is consistent with previous parcels and represents an improvement over and above the outline requirements. So I think the request of fast charges in the future we can look at for other sites, but it's noted for here, but not something that we can secure on this reserve matters.
Just, yeah, on the fast chargers, I mean, that the place to have that would probably be up where the retail area is and the community area. And the other thing, just a further question, sorry, on the allotments. I assume that these will be gated. And are there any permitted developments for people to put sheds on the allotments? Does the actual individual allotments, is that allowed? Thank you. It's for storage of tools.
So the allotments are gated. The allotment arrival park is open to everyone, but then there is a gate when entering the allotments themselves. And regarding sheds on the allotments, I think that will be, so the City Council will be managing the allotments, and there is to be an allotment management strategy which will need to come forward to discharge the outline condition for allotments, and that will look to manage activities on the allotments, including any storage sheds.
Content. So, Councillor Carling.
Thank you very much. Just before I speak, I think Councillor Khan was trying to get your attention about something there. I'm not sure if it's... Okay, so if I could just, first of all, before I start asking my question, just kind of commend the applicant on something we haven't discussed yet, which is that all of the plots are dual aspect, which I think is really, really positive and something we're always looking for as a committee. So I wanted to ask briefly about condition 24, which is the rationale is given on page 71. And condition 24 essentially removes the permitted development rights for the conversion of garages and carports. I was just wondering if we could hear a bit more about the logic behind that, because, you know, as a city right now, there's a lot of work going on to reduce the amount of cars that are on the roads and such like. I'm just kind of wondering why we're discouraging people who have bought a plot that don't need a garage and such like from using it for something else. My other question relates to condition 2, non-adopted roads, discussed on page 74. Essentially, it's saying we're recommending that unadopted streets are constructed to an adoptable standard in a condition, in which case, I guess my question is, why can't we just adopt them then? Which would probably be positive. So, thank you.
Okay, so you've got a question on condition 24 and a condition on adoption of highways. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Regarding condition 24, removal of permitted development rights for conversion of garages and carports, as stated in the reason for that condition, this is in the interest of protecting that space, which can also be used to store bicycles and other alternative sustainable transport modes. So it's not just about car parking. It's also about alternative transport, and that doesn't preclude someone from converting those garages that would just require a planning application to consider any impact that might have, because the positions of these garages are often to the front of plots and could have impact on amenity. So that's the reason for that condition being in place. And just regarding the question about unadopted streets being built to adoptable standards, that is not so much the dimensions of the streets, but the material and base layer of the streets, so that when they're being driven on, they hold up to vehicle to vehicles crossing over them. And in some parts, there may be that refuse vehicles or other delivery vehicles use those roads. And so it's just a way to ensure a good standard for the construction of those roads.
Colin?
Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense. That's not entirely clear from the condition as I read it. I'm not sure if perhaps it might be worth tweaking the wording slightly, or perhaps it's fine as is. I think this isn't necessarily this application, but this is a constant problem we're getting about adopted roads. I'm just wondering if we're having any discussions with the Highways Authority about the kind of constraints and such like on this already.
We happen to have Dr. John Finney on the line, so perhaps he can have a word on this.
That would be useful. I was just going to ask.
Yeah, Dr. Finney, can you just give us chapter on verse 2, help Councillor Carley on this one, please?
Very good, sir. First of all, my name is Dr. John Finney. I'm Principal Development Management Engineer for Cambridgeshire County Council's Highway Authority. In response to your question, as Julia very kindly explained, construction is two elements within the highway, essentially, which is how it is built, which obviously then allows, as Julia said, refuse vehicles, etc., to use the road without undue damage, which of course also is advantageous to the residents of those streets, because our construction specification is for minimal maintenance for 25 years and preferably minimal intervention for 40 years. So as you can appreciate, that obviously has an impact on how much you have to pay in terms of maintenance charges. Then there is the design and layout of the street. That is where the critical matter for the Highway Authority comes in. We have our own design standards, which are now policy. They recently became policy in March this year, which lay out what we consider to be adoptable. Now, that may be different to what people conceive to be acceptable in terms of design. For example, widths of carriageway, we will not accept anything less than 5 metres in width. The Manual for Streets says 4.8 is acceptable, but that's based on designs of motor vehicles dating back to 1977, and motor vehicles have got slightly wider since then, primarily because of the introduction of safety features, side impact bars, etc. Also, so we will not adopt streets that do not meet our standards. Also, we will not adopt streets that serve less than 5 individual dwellings. That relates to the fact that below that number, the residents can't insist on public utilities servicing their site. It's not common, obviously, within the city of Cambridge, within the county of Cambridge. We have many isolated dwellings, some distance from the adopted public highway, and we do not want to be responsible for maintaining the effect of their private access drive to 2 or 3 dwellings, which can be, so to say, kilometres from the adopted public highway. So that's a general policy that we have adopted of we will not adopt roads of serving less than 5 individual dwellings. A number of sites want to use different materials, which we don't adopt without paying a commuted sum, which again still can be built to adoptable standards, but we will not generally seek to adopt those areas. So we do have our own criteria, which are clearly laid out in our design guide, what we will seek to adopt. If a developer chooses to go down that route, obviously, then we're more than happy to seek to adopt. What we cannot do, and I know the rest of the committee is probably aware of this, the committee, neither yourselves nor us, can force a developer to adopt. That is entirely their choice. If you think of the Eddington development, the entire site, some 3,000 units, is remaining private and maintained by the University of Cambridge as a private landowner, and we cannot make them make that into adopted public highway. I hope that explains the situation reasonably well.
You now have your doctorate in highway adoption. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Finney. Really appreciate that helpful guidance, because this is an issue that keeps recurring at the committee. So thank you very much for that. So I've got Councillor Khan next. But there's a bit members speak before.
About the detailed discharge, the condition on drainage. We've had problems in Impington, my ward, with a development where the we had a drainage plan which was accepted, and there have been drainage problems since, flooding on adjoining land. I'm concerned that when we had the conditions for the outline application for over by Cherry Hill to Teversham, you had a condition which allowed you to go in to make to require problems which arise after the site has been developed to be put right. We had a problem in the situation in our ward that if you have a condition where only the drainage design being accepted takes place, and there are problems because it's very difficult to predict everything that happens with drainage, you were not able to take a planning action, enforcement action to resolve the problem. So that the condition on the Teversham site allowed you to take enforcement action if the problems arose. This is a flat site, it's on Gork clay. We're not quite sure what the conditions will be. You had construction, the construction site's been built on it, so there's likely to have been compaction. I think it is possible that problems might arise even if with a good design for sustainable drainage. Is it possible, therefore, to amend the condition to take account of problems which arise despite the drainage plan having been accepted?
Okay, so thank you for that. Who's got their head around local lead flood authority environment agency matters on this one? I do know there is this does this fall within part of the infrastructure plan?
I think if I can answer the question, you know, the site-wide strategic infrastructure for drainage has already been put in and approved via the infrastructure reserve matters. So what we're looking at for this parcel is how the plot feeds in essentially into that strategic network. So looking at on a plot by plot basis, and also the areas of open space and landscaping, how those are drained into the strategic infrastructure. And that is controlled via the conditions that have already been put in place on the outline. The applicant has provided drainage information. The LLFA is satisfied with that information. So there should be no reason why the assessment that's been done by the applicant and reviewed by the LLFA shouldn't, when built out, lead to an acceptable drainage solution for this parcel, connecting into that site-wide infrastructure. And we do have the opportunity to enforce against that condition if those details haven't been built out in accordance with that approval. So I would say that that is the common approach that we normally take and have historically taken on planning applications, and I don't see that there's a reason to add any further conditions to this parcel.
I will only comment that that was exactly the situation in our site in Impington, and the problem arose. The problem arose because the levels were slightly out, and it was impermeable land, and the water couldn't drain off. And we were stuck because the only position was that the plan had been accepted. It was built according to the plan, but it didn't work. This can, I mean, it could have been, we're not quite, I think it's levels, it might have been compaction. But the problem is that it didn't work, and we had no recourse to take action. And I'm a bit concerned that the situation might apply here. If it's done well and it works, it won't be a problem that you had a condition.
We get the point.
With respect to the strategic infrastructure, that forms part of the open space that will be taken on by the City Council. So there will be, and there have been, inspection works for that strategic infrastructure already. So I think perhaps it's about monitoring those works going forward.
So I think Councillor Khan is asking for a belt to go with the braces. And that's the question. So what's the answer to that question?
In my opinion, I think we should. I don't think it would be reasonable to put on another condition requiring detail action to be taken by the developer in the event that that issues arise, because I think they've provided the information and we've assessed it. We should be confident with that assessment. I don't know whether Keith or Philippa have anything further to add on that.
Thank you, Charlotte. Through you, Chair. No, I completely agree with the position that Charlotte has identified. So, you know, we've assessed the technical information. The lead local flood authority has confirmed the acceptability. We have a recommended condition, which is in your report, and we're of the view that it would not be reasonable to expand upon that condition on the basis of the advice and the position we've established through the lead local flood authority's advice. Thank you.
Councillor Khan, you said there was a precedent.
I'm not terribly happy about it, but I hope there won't be a problem. But this precedent, from what we've experienced on similar soil and similar flat ground, has made me very concerned that this may arise in the future on other sites.
I think we're just going to be left with faith that all of the technical work has been done properly. Okay, Councillor Thornborough.
I just want to back Councillor Khan because we had something similar, but it was mainly what we're finding is that the storms that we're getting are more frequent and worse than the design calculations the engineers use, and we're not keeping up with climate change. But that's the situation we're in. There is data. The guidance and legislation is being followed, but things are overtaking us. And I think we need to be almost warning people that even though these are built as designed, there's going to be situations going forward where there will be flooding, and we need to be prepared for that because that's coming.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Yeah, so Councillor Thornborough, totally appreciate the points you're making. I think this is something that officers can take away and have a separate conversation with the officers in the lead local flood authority to take some advice how we can, in future, with their confirmation of approach, widen the scope of these types of conditions so we do adopt the belt and braces approach to protect against those scenarios that you're referencing today. Thanks.
Councillor Bevan, please.
Well, it's a reiteration of an earlier point from Councillor Carling. I just wanted to check, on 18.4, on removal of permitted development rights for the conversion of garages, which Councillor Carling raised, one of the concerns is that one of the typologies here is flats over garages. And I know in other developments we have sought to ensure that these shouldn't then be turned into commercial businesses or indeed workshops that might be noisy, you know. And I just wondered, would that be covered by the normal permitted development rights? I mean, for example, if somebody who lived in a flat over a garage suddenly found there was a business of car repair going on underneath them, which was noisy or late at night, would they have some protection against that?
Charlotte?
I think if somebody starts running a business from their garage underneath the flat, then it would likely, and it's to the extent that it's causing a nuisance to residents nearby, that it would be likely to consider a change of use requiring planning permission. So it would be controlled in that way. I'm just looking at the wording, just trying to find the wording of that condition just to check that it does include all garages.
I'm looking at paragraph 18.4 on page 71.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, I think condition 24 is referring to the conversion of all garages and carports, so that would include the garages below the fogs. And I just, yeah, I think reiterate my answer regarding change of use.
Thank you.
So it's the condition that matters, not the narrative in that paragraph. Councillor Pora.
I think maybe as we've all spoken after can we have a quick break after that, Chair, as you mentioned. Secondly, I'll be really quick. Yes, please, to the informative about letterbox accessibility. I think I saw other people nodding, so I'm hoping, yeah. It's good to hear service charges are held for affordable, but I do have some concerns about private houses because we have a responsibility to them as well. I think Councillor Thornborough mentioned car club spaces. There's no explicit reference here. I don't think Julia picked up on it. I would like very much for there to be some car club, and I would also like to ask for an informative that that's put in the information to new residents, so so they know about it. We've done that on previous, I think, BDW developments. I suppose my biggest point, as I raised in my question, is the weight of the phasing. I am still concerned at the moment. I take Charlotte's point that we have overlooked it or set it aside for previous ones, but this is the last parcel. So if this parcel goes forward with no sort of further stock conditions, what incentive is there for the developer to complete on the phasing? I mean, I have to say, this developer, have clearly engaged, and this is good, a lot of the things they're doing, so it's not personal to this developer. But I think as a point of principle, if we have outstanding phasing conditions that affect community assets and traffic, I am concerned. So I'd be, after the break, perhaps Charlotte or Julie could just come back and explain where we are with that. Because for me, I appreciate it's not huge weight, but every time we have a parcel, people say, don't worry, there's another one coming forward, there's another one. If this is it. So I would really like to see some kind of condition that says no sale until something's been agreed with the LPA. But I appreciate that might take a bit of time for response. So if we could have a 2-minute break, that would be much appreciated.
No one else has indicated they want to speak, but I do. Okay, so there's just one minor point that I would like to raise, which is on page 64, section 17.4. It relates to 1 Hoadley Road. It says a hedgerow will be planted along the boundary within the red line of the application. Could that be confirmed as 1.5 metres high? Because I think that is the height of the hedge that was agreed on the boundary between Woodlark and BDW2, and it's one continuous stretch. So it would be consistent with which was agreed under that previous phase. Can the officers confirm that that would be acceptable, please?
I think it's, if I can just answer that question, I think it's probably worth us just checking the landscape plan already to see whether that detail is included, if the height is included on that. So perhaps if we can do that in the break, then there wouldn't need to be any further conditions because it would be already covered by the landscape plan.
Mr. Campbell, did you want to do?
Just a very brief thing, actually, which I had also wanted to say, regarding the permitted development rights for windows. There's a little bit of inconsistency here. You're talking about requiring glazed obscured windows for all windows, and yet the restrictions on opening do not apply to windows which are more than 1.7 metres above the floor of the room, where obviously, because it's so high, you can't overlook. It doesn't seem to me that there really should be a requirement also for windows which, to be glazed if they're over 1.7 metres, because then you can't overlook. It's just a little point that you might wonder.
Did you receive that message? And which section is it relating to?
So it's condition 18, which is to do with the permitted developments of the windows. If you have a window above 1.7 metres above the floor of the room, that's to design so you can't overlook because you can't look out of the window unless you happen to be 7 or 8 feet tall. There doesn't seem to me any real obligation to have an obscure window if it's above that height. It just doesn't seem logical when you also say the same thing about having, where you say that when it's above that height you can't open, you can open the window in the second part of the condition. In other words, I feel the same condition ought to apply to both sections of the restriction. It seems a bit unreasonable to require them to be glazed if you can't look out in any case.
Okay, so the officers will look at that during the break. So we'll break now, okay? Obviously you can't talk about the planning application whilst we're having the break. 5 minutes, please. Thank you. So we're at the point where we're going to debate the planning application. There are 3 issues I've got in front of me. The first one raised by Councillor Pora about the question of breaches in section 106 and other obligations, requirements. Charlotte, could you just brief us on the current position with these particular breaches, please?
Thank you, Chair. In relation to compliance with the Section 106, as a committee know, we have been monitoring compliance, and there are areas where the development is falling behind meeting some of those triggers. So in particular, relating to open space, some of the community facilities and medical facilities. Now, we have previously provided updates to the committee and advised on how we're working with the developer and other parties to try and resolve those breaches. In relation to how material they are to this application, as I've already said, I think we would give it similar weight to previous parcels. I don't think there's any reason to give it further weight. And then in answer to the question about whether or not that there are additional controls that we could put in on this reserve matters application to try and require compliance, I don't think that would. I think the controls that we already have in terms of the condition on the outline consent for the phasing plan and also the controls within the Section 106 obligations itself provides us with sufficient mechanisms for us to take enforcement action against those where we find that it is in the public interest to do so. So I would still encourage members to consider for us to treat the compliance with the Section 106 as a separate matter to the consideration of this reserved matters. I don't know whether Philippa or Keith want to add anything further to that.
Thanks, Chair. I've got really nothing further to add to what Charlotte has said other than to endorse and support what she has said. Here today, this application is not the mechanism to introduce further controls in relation to the Section 106 obligations and other breaches elsewhere on the wider Darwin Green. They are being looked at separately by members and officers. Officers have said they will come back to you and report further as progress is made. There will, of course, ultimately be a point where the authority will wish to take action if the developer has not satisfactorily answered the questions that we have or indeed started to perform the obligations. And a report along those lines and about those matters will come back here to you to debate and support. So I think Charlotte and the report has adequately covered it off in relation to today's application you have.
So as we heard in the objections that were read out, there is a public interest in the question of the delivery of the temporary access through to Windsor Road. This was raised by another party at the Northwest Community Forum, and the reason for that was that now there are a large number of people living at Darwin Green and there are no local shop facilities, and access through to Windsor Road would open up their access to those shops and other facilities, pharmacy, for example, on Histon Road. Now, this breach is quite a serious one, was attached to the infrastructure reserve matters, required the submission of details. They have been submitted and discharged, but also its delivery before the first occupation of the local central schools. The built properties in the local centre have now been occupied. So there is an expectation then that this temporary route is delivered, and I think this committee needs to know what the builders' intentions are in respect of addressing this breach. Those members who attended the site visit and saw the new mugger will have noticed the proximity between the end of the path that's been constructed and Windsor Road. This is not a big deal, but there doesn't seem to be any confirmation of timely delivery of this temporary path. So these are concerns that we have to address, respond to the community interest in this. So could we have an update on the position with that and what steps have been made to ensure there is compliance with this breach?
Through you, Chair, then, as you've correctly identified, this is a matter of compliance with the condition on the infrastructure reserve matters, and also compliance with the phasing plan, the approved phasing plan, which is via condition 5 on the outline consent. As you said, that there is a design for this temporary route which has been approved via the discharge of that condition 3. Officers have been in discussion with the developer regarding the temporary route. As members will know from the briefing we gave on the amended phasing plan which has been submitted, the applicant has indicated that that the temporary route wouldn't come forward. Members gave a clear steer at that committee, as you've done just now, that there is support for a temporary link, and that feedback has been provided to the developer to consider and further respond to. I understand from the developer that there are some construction challenges. Officers have asked for a full explanation about what those construction challenges might be and some of the options that could be put forward to overcome those challenges, mindful of obviously public safety across that route. So currently we are in discussions with the applicant on that. That includes a site visit being undertaken by one of our officers next week to see on the ground what those challenges are and how those might be overcome. So that's where we are in those discussions at the moment.
Well, performance against conditions is not Woolworths pick and mix. The developer has entered willingly into this condition on 2 counts, both in relating to the infrastructure application and with the first phasing plan. Those are commitments which I think we need to see fulfilled. This is about trust and confidence that the developer is going to enter into conditions and means that they're going to fulfill them, not kick the can down the road and try and come back and change the proposition. I think that there's concern that the developer is not proceeding with this obligation, and I find there's a lack of credibility, or I'm incredulous that there's no way that this can be delivered, and I'd rather want to hear solutions rather than excuses. So I think on behalf of the committee, I think we were looking forward to confirmation that this temporary path is going to be delivered. Okay, so can we just now move on to the question of the open space and the design of that open space? Members will be aware that that is part of the discharge of outline condition 10, youth facility and children's play provision. That's not in front of us today, but we do have the opportunity to agree an informative to the developer on the design that we'd want to see that coming forward for that. The concern was raised by Councillor Bradman that there's a path that bisects the play area, which means that it will be a through route for two-wheeled vehicles. That's not just a toddler on a little bike, that's a delivery vehicle on an electric bike, and quite an unsuitable sort of form of traffic through a play area. I don't know about other members of the committee, but I'd like to think children can run around in a play area without the threat of being encountering a dog or a delivery person on an electric bike. So could we agree then to basically have that informative that the lab is to provide a safe space for children and to be the play area to be protected from dogs and cyclists riding through the lab by layout, fencing and gates? Thank you.
I had suggested, please could we consider reorientating the grass area and the cycle route such that they are beside and not one across the other?
This is exactly what happened at the Trumpington Community Gardens. There was a strategic route through that, and subsequently we had to get another planning application to move it outside. So picking it up now is really of a good thing. Could we also add in the detail for skateboard-friendly landscaping? Thank you.
Hang on Philippa's amazing touch typing speeds to record all of this. Thank you. The other one was relating to the Gateway area, Windsor Road, and the fact that that area has been asked to do 4 different things. It's been asked to be the transition area between the cyclists and pedestrians entering and leaving Windsor Road, and the crossovers between the footpaths and the cycle lane at that particular point. It's an amenity space for the residents living in the immediate area. It's providing gaps for those residents to move their bins in and out of their properties. But that then opens up the 4th function, which is to become desire lines for residents who are living on BDW2 or for the rest of the residents who are living on BDW3 who may find it more convenient to go through those dog legs. Now, what it means is you'll be getting pedestrians and cyclists on the narrow paths navigating a series of 90-degree turns. And it's just, I think it's just asking, it's creating more conflicts, it's eroding residential amenity, and I understand the planning benefit of porosity. I think we've also got to balance that against the resulting conflicts of activities and the amenity of the residents.
Again, relating to what's happened in South Trumpington, where something similar has happened, the spaces they aren't used as amenity in sitting out and play areas. There's so many coming and goings that sort of is not conducive to that. But they're nicely landscaped, and that's nice, and it has worked, except the amenity space has not come forward as amenity space. It's not used as amenity space.
And is the committee minded to ask the applicant to have another look at this particular detail to resolve these conflicts? I have a similar problem in the ward. We arranged for a gate to be installed, and they've got lots of people walking through their their shared garden spaces, and then the gate was installed, and that solved the problem. So there are solutions that can be addressed here. Okay. Well, I'm seeing agreement for that. Thank you for that. I've got those off my chest and other people's chests, I suppose. But are there any other people talking now generally about the application before we move to asking the officers to read out the recommendations and taking the vote? Carl.
The comment I want to make, I don't think it's soluble through planning, but I think it... No, but I wanted, it may be suitable for an informative. There's a problem that I've discussed this with Mrs. Kelly earlier on, and you have here affordable houses, flats, which are in a joint building, and you've included these, some of which are shared ownership. A problem that's arisen in one of we have, where in my ward, is where such flats have had problems arise before the management funds have built up sufficient money for the repairs required. And the position is that even if you have 25% shared ownership, you're liable for 100% of the costs of the repairs. This is a major problem. If you have affordable buildings which you have a joint management on. It's not a problem if you have if you have a shared ownership house. There isn't apparently a way you can do it by do anything under the planning legislation to do this, but it might be worthwhile putting an informative that suggesting to the developer that they make the tenants aware of this risk and they take appropriate action. That's just a note.
Thank you for that. I'm talking about global issues with the whole application, how you feel about it. Okay.
But just to pick up the car club issue, because I don't think we had an answer on that, I asked it just before the break. And again, just to reiterate, I'd really like some car club spaces, and even if not, I think we've got them elsewhere on the site. I'd like reference to them. And I do agree with the chair that I think I am really concerned about the phasing. I do take officers and Keith's point that this isn't a material reason for refusal today. But I would like to add my marker to the chairs that this is something I think the committee will be keeping a close eye on. Thank you.
Anybody want to make some general comments about the overall application rather than detail? We've done the detail.
Don't think that you can solve this now because it's late in the day, but picking up what Councillor Thornborough has said, I really would like underground bins to be looked at. And I second the points about phasing and delivery of Section 106. Thank you.
Just to kind of add on to what Councillor Flora said, I really do think we should be doing something about the car club thing here. I know it's a detail, but can we add some kind of conditional informative or something to make it so that there are car club spaces provided in some way?
There is always it's in the report, there is car club provision on the site, and what we can say is that provision needs to be increased as the demand arises. This is happening on Edington. I think it's happening here too. The car club spaces are actually in the local centre area already. Councillor Thornborough.
I think there's been really interesting lessons about all of the plots developing and how it's become more successful in a way as time goes on with the community forums and the existing residents nearby. And I really appreciate that developer has actually moved a long way from the outline consent. But we learn more and more every day about problems elsewhere that might come up here. As Councillor Khan said, I would really like us to look at moving to common hold wherever we have blocks of flats, and actually making sure that private residents in flats are protected, as well as social and council house tenants regarding maintenance. But I don't know if we can, but it would be a great aspiration. But also, you know, we're looking in Cambridge at doing a community heat network. So we're looking to retrofit it. And as Councillor Fain was saying, you know, we need to, in these new developments, let's be leading on all of these things more. Thank you.
Just been told that we've lost the cameras, people can't see us speaking, but I'm continuing. People just have to go out without seeing our lovely faces for a moment. Okay, so I think what we're looking at is we're looking at the phase 2 coming up. It would be helpful for us to have a session in the next municipal year of the new chair, to reflect on what we've learned from these large developments, so that we can have another round of saying, well, these are the issues that now matter to us as members, for the officers to take into their pre-application discussions. I think one of the key highlights of this committee, since I've been on it, has actually been it's very much a learning committee, and one where we've been drawing out that learning from the cases that have been put in front of us. And we've seen how that has been applied in the subsequent applications that have come to us. And today has been a good example of that. We're pressed for time today, so I'd like now to move to the vision. And we will now ask Philippa, are you ready?
I'm ready indeed. Thank you, Chair.
If you can now just summarise the main points.
Sorry, am I able to interrupt?
Yes. John?
I just wanted to pick up on one of Councillor Bradnam's questions regarding whether the committee wanted to consider any further conditions regarding
yes.
The impact on property 12 Stratfield Close, given that we've had the representation read out from them today as well.
Yes, sorry, I overlooked that. Thank you, Charlotte.
We have already removed the permitted development rights for 2-storey extensions to the rear of that property. Julie has set out her assessment as to why we consider the separation distances to be acceptable in terms of overlooking. However, if members did have a concern about that, then we could add those plots, and it would be plots 191 to 193. We could add it to conditions 18 and 19, removing permitted development rights for any additional windows or additions to the roof, which could include roof lights. If members were concerned about potentially adding any extra windows and intensifying any overlooking. But we as officers have assessed the impact, and we think it's acceptable without those conditions. But if members wanted to consider additional conditions, then that's what I would recommend. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can you just indicate to me whether you're minded to do that or not? The officer's advice is not. No. I'm seeing no, Councillor Bradnam, across the committee. So thank you for looking for that, Charlotte.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Philippa, you'll go.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to dwell long on summing up the proposals because it's been thoroughly discussed today. So I'm going to move straight on to the officer recommendation, which you'll find on page 91 of your agenda under section 24.1. We'll take that one first, which is the approval of the reserve matters application reference 2105434 REM, which is one of approval. Now, it is subject to the conditions and informative set out in your report, but we also heard from Julie, and she presented a very useful slide as part of her presentation, some updates which are included on your amendment sheet. Just to summarise what's on the amendment sheet first, and then we'll take the additional updates that you've discussed today. So the amendments and changes on the amendment sheet are in relation to condition 27, which is an additional condition relating to retention of private amenity space in respect of those properties facing the orbital cycle route. We have an amended condition 9 relating to plant noise insulation. We have an amended condition 23 relating to garages, and amended condition 26 related to bollard design and management. Now, I'd also like to now move on to the additional updates to those conditions and new informatives that you have discussed today. And I think I've captured them, but I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm mistaken. So first of all, with regard to that additional condition 27 on the amendment sheet, we're going to include some additional wording to state that that width shall be no more than the number of metres. And that was, I think, came from Councillor Bradnam. We are then going to widen the scope of the conditions relating to the removal of the permitted development rights in conditions 19 and 20. We're going to, in that reason, relate to the specific properties on Windsor Road. So it's very clear in that condition. And we are also going to, as I understand it, restrict single-storey extensions where those properties relate to the Windsor Road properties as well. And I understood that for the avoidance of doubt, we were also looking to remove all permitted development rights of the property that is abutting 12 Stratfield Close, and we can do that as an additional condition, a specific condition in relation to that particular plot. All of these changes, we've altered into the recommendation that it's delegated to officers to draft those conditions, but Chair, Vice Chair, should you wish to see the final version, we can do that. We also have some additional informatives. So the informative that was requested by the Windsor Road Residents Association relating to the design and the details of the Windsor Road Park to ensure the need for appropriate boundary protection and the redesign of that area, and also appropriate provision for skateboarders. So that is through an informative. We also have the additional informative relating to accessible letterbox design to secure by design standards, and an additional informative as well relating to provision of car club spaces as the demand rises. I think that captures all of those additional changes that you were seeking through conditions informatives. Councillor Paul.
Just to say, could we also have the information about car clubs is included in the information packs for new residents, which I believe we did on the previous parcels, or at least one of them?
Just making a few notes here. Yes, so agree car club information to be included in residents pack. We can bring that in as an informative, and gateway redesign of the Windsor Road area as well. No, that will be as a condition and notwithstanding the approved plans. Yeah. Oh, one more hand. Charlotte, do you want to come in there?
Sorry, could I just seek clarification? Philippa, did you include a condition to remove the permitted development rights for the plots affecting 12 Stratfield Close? Because I thought that was contrary to what members had just decided. Just to be clear.
Charlotte is right. I thought I did mention that property. That was the intention for an additional condition removing all PD rights in respect of 12 Stratfield. Was I wrong in respect of?
No, 12 Stratfield, not for itself. It's for the properties affecting it.
But it was the only one that was the property that was closest to it, not the additional two.
But also, Chair, can we amend recommendation 2 so that it comes back to Chair and Vice Chair.
So on the basis of all of that is the first part of the recommendation. Yes, please.
So, members, can we just vote on the first part then of the recommendation? Raising your hands. Unanimous, thank you.
Thank you. And then the second part that you're voting in respect of is it on page 91 of your agenda, paragraph 24.2. That is to either approve or refuse the partial discharge of a number of outline planning conditions in relation to this particular reserve matters parcel. Is it in accordance with the table that you see from page 91 at the bottom onwards, just subject to a slight amendment that's referred to on the amendment sheet at paragraph 24.2, which relates to secure parking of bicycles and updated drawing reference numbers. Thank you.
And now can we take the vote on that, please, by raising your hands? Unanimous, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Payne, did you have? I'd like to thank the officers that have toiled so heavily on producing this application and bring it to fruition, and the cooperation and support that we've had from the applicant in bringing forward quite substantial improvements to what was approved under the outline. I think there's a lot in this application to be commended, and we look forward to even further progress with the next phase of Darwin Green. So thank you very much. So we now move on to So we now move on to agenda item 5, 22/04989/REM, lots 5 and 4, M4 and M5, Eddington Land between Madingley Road and Huntingdon Road, Cambridge, Cambridgeshire, CB3 0DL. Could the Principal Planner please introduce this item? Thank you, Guy.
Thank you, Chair. So this is, as I said, this is application 22/0489 REM. It's a reserved matters application for the appearance, landscaping, layout and scale for 160 dwellings, associated access roads, cycle and pedestrian routes, cycle and car parking, landscaping and associated utilities and infrastructure at Edington. So just by way of background, the outline application for Edington was granted in February 2013, and one of the conditions of the outline permission was that reserve matters approved applications other than for student accommodation and academic research development were to be submitted within 10 years, which brings us to February of this year. This application was submitted prior to that, but it means this will be the sort of last residential reserve matters application under the existing outline permission. So this just shows the red line site location plan. Apologies, it's a bit of a fake sort of outline. So it's on the eastern side of Edington. It borders properties on Huntington Road to the north, and there's some commercial development to the north and northwest. Within the site, there's a number of sort of redundant buildings, and the site also includes the secondary street, which will connect into Edington Avenue to the west. So just give it a bit more context here. So this again shows the site outlined in red. You have Huntington Road to the northeast, with Durham Green beyond that. There's an avenue of horse chestnut trees to the east of the site, and then Stories Field, which is an area of open space to the south of the site. And then to the west, you have the existing sort of phase 1 development within Edington, including the primary school, Stories Field Centre, and sports pitches. And you can see here as well where the site will be accessed from Edington Avenue. And then just another aerial view just to show the site. So the eastern part of the site is largely agricultural, so previously agricultural land, and then sort of western part of the site contains a number of redundant buildings, as well as a sort of a copse within the centre of the site, then to the south west of the site is a office building that's to be retained. To the north there is some commercial development, so that's the Premier Inn and Beefeater on Huntington Road, with some offices and also retail uses just behind that. And then you've got residential development along the northeast side, which is houses along Huntington Road. So those are typically sort of 2.5 story detached dwellings. You can see here as well, we've got the Durham Green development again to the north of the site. Provide some photographs of the site. So this is just a view looking across the site. You can see it's essentially laid to grass. It's quite a level site. There's the sort of copse on the left-hand side of this image, and you can see the boundary with properties on Huntington Road. And a bit of a closer-up image of that boundary. You can see there's some existing hedging and trees along that boundary, but with some gaps as well. Then moving on to, this is an image of the copse. You can see it contains sort of a mix of tree species in sort of varying conditions, and you can see as well some of the derelict buildings which to be demolished within the site here. And then just another photograph of some of the other buildings to be demolished as well. So to provide an overview of the site, there's a number of elements proposed. So there's the secondary street, which runs along the southern boundary of the site, where the cursor is here. There's a series of pavilion blocks, which are 4-story along sort of the southern side, and then you can see that copse area with then 2 courtyard blocks beyond that. And then sort of houses along the development edge, which are a mix of sort of linked detached, semi-detached and terrace houses between 2 and 3 stories high. So in relation to story heights, this plan shows the proposed story heights. So you can see the 4-story prevailing blocks along fronting of the story field, and then the sort of again the 4th-story element to the eastern courtyard block here as well, and then so we can see the courtyards again sort of 2 to 3 story, and then development houses along development edge again a mix of 2 and 3 story. So in terms of building heights and story heights, there's kind of two elements of guidance within the outline permission. So there's the parameter plans, which set out sort of fixed maximum heights for buildings, and the proposal is fully compliant with the parameter plans. The design code also includes guidance on story heights. You can see that the colours on this bottom left here match the plan on the right, so you can see that the blocks A, B, and C are compliant with the maximum sort of story height guidance, and then there is a couple of areas of non-compliance. So block E, which is the one in the sort of bottom right corner, that slightly exceeds the story guidance within the design code, which is for sort of 2 to 3 stories generally, and then along the development edge, the design code advises sort of 2 stories generally, but as you can see, it's a mix of sort of 2 and 3 story. Officers kind of considered the sort of story heights sort of through the pre-application process and the application, and there's sort of a number of elements which considered here. So the block E, it's kind of in a fairly prominent position, a junction of the secondary street and the loop road. And also, it's kind of, and so provides a key sort of strong sort of element on that corner, and also steps down then to the sort of the houses on the northeast, and also there's further design elements which help to break up the massing and scale of the buildings, which I'll come on to in my presentation. And then again with the development edge housing, there's a sort of a mix of 2 and 3 story buildings, which is sort of there's elements which are set back as well, which help to sort of break up the scale of massing, and officers are satisfied that the deviation from design code in relation to story heights is justified and acceptable. So to move on to sort of the elevations and sort of design of the blocks, this shows the elevations of block A. So there's 2 kind of, or 3 kind of key design elements used across this block and across the site. So there's what's the applicant described as sort of a rigid grid detail, which is, you can see where the cursor is on the screen here, where you have this quite sort of regular grid style, and there's a more informal grid sort of with more asymmetric elements, which you can see in the sort of where the cursor now, and then setback elements in sort of typically in a darker brick. And those elements are used across the site to sort of break up the massing and to activate the elevations of the buildings. Then just to show how the scheme has evolved through the pre-application and application process. So top left here, this is again block A, sort of from an early pre-app, and then the top right shows how that's evolved through the later pre-app process, and then the bottom right sort of shows the sort of the current proposals. You can see how the elevation's been refined, and the massing sort of considered kind of further to with those kind of those bays of the sort of asymmetric elements and the rigid grids and the setback elements used to break up the massing of the building. Then just another view of block A. This is the elevation from looking at it from sort of the secondary street in Storys Field. Again, you've got a sort of early edge here again to show how it's evolved, and then to the current application proposals. And again, you can see that sort of rigid grid detail and that sort of asymmetric sort of grid, and then the setback elements as well used. Now to just move on to the housing. So this is just a sort of typical example of the sort of courtyard housing. So again, uses primarily that sort of asymmetric grid with things such as sort of setback balconies. And also you can see here sort of the sort of link elements, which are again set back to sort of reduce the sort of the scale and sort of massing of the buildings. Then again, very similar with the development edge housing. So this is one of the 3-story houses. Again, you can see the similar sort of elevation treatment, the use of setback elements, including the sort of setback of garage area, and then also on these ones, there's a sort of setback area. This is on the second floor, so that's sort of rear, where there's to reduce that massing to the rear of the buildings where they face sort of Huntington Road. And then one of the sort of 2-story houses at the bottom here as well. Then I won't linger these, but just again some more examples of the design of sort of the houses along the development edge. So this just shows at the eastern end there's some houses with a sort of a mansard type design to the sort of rear elevation, just to illustrate that here. And then sort of bringing that together, this shows some site sections. So this is looking along the loop road within the site. So looking at sort of block A, then sort of moving north towards the sort of northern corner, and then the middle and bottom sections here show the elevations along the sort of northeast side of the site. So those are the houses which sort of back onto Huntington Road. You can see that use of sort of linked attached, semi-detached, and then sort of terraced houses. So generally, the terraces are 2-story, and then you have the taller elements, so either linked attached or semi-detached here. And then some more sections are showing the frontage along the secondary streets that will be facing onto Storey's Field. So again, that's you've got that sort of block A, you've got sort of views into the Copse area, then blocks B and C, which are essentially identical, and then blocks D and E at the bottom you can see here as well. Then just quickly some site sections. So this is these are sections through the site, so showing houses on Huntington Road on the left-hand side, and then the proposed houses, and then also Block E on the right-hand side. So to give you an idea of the relationship there. So one of the elements of the design code is that there should be a sort of 20-metre sort of buffer between development and the boundary with neighbouring residences. So that's shown here. You see this 20-metre garden. And then existing properties along Huntington Road typically have gardens of around 40 metres or more. And then you can see that shows that kind of the relative sort of heights and relationship between those proposed dwellings and the existing ones on Huntington Road. Just quickly touching on the architectural design and sort of use of brickwork. So within Edgerton at the moment, sort of the predominance of brickwork and sort of design is using sort of quite light buff brick and sort of precast concrete elements. So this proposal looks to introduce some greater variation to sort of reflect the sort of slightly more suburban nature of this part of the site. So there's a sort of orange-red brick proposed, a sort of a lighter buff, and a sort of more sort of orangey buff brick, and then also a sort of dark grey-brown brick, which is primarily for those sort of setback elements. And you can see here but that's proposed to be sort of mixed in along the site to provide sort of variation sort of throughout the site. And then just some of the architectural details. So you can see here, this is the main image here is in one of the internal views of one of the courtyards. So you can see there's kind of brick banding details around the windows and also at ground floor level. And then you can see also sort of some of the sort of setback elements, and including others used for sort of balcony areas as well. And then on the left, just a sort of typical detailing of some of the sort of rigid grid detailing. So you can see there's you have this sort of express grid with sort of brick panels sort of recessed behind that, and then that's also continues up into this sort of balcony area for parts of the blocks, and also provides sort of semi-enclosed sort of balcony or terrace area. And then just a bit more on the architectural design. So again, this shows some of the sort of brick detailing. One of the comments from when this application went to the quality panel, and also I think something members mentioned when the applicants briefed JDCC before, was to look at sort of blending some of the brickwork. So this shows how some of the sort of buff bricks proposed to be brought into sort of this red house here. In some of the banding detail, to kind of have a sort of add a bit more variation, also kind of soften that sort of difference in brickwork. So moving on to the streets and sort of open space network. So as I've mentioned, you've got the secondary streets which runs along the bottom of the site. Then you have a loop road which is comprises this sort of tertiary street design, and then a green lane along the sort of northwestern side, which then sort of links into the sort of central COPS area. And there's a second sort of green lane within sort of centre of the site, and then you've got these two internal courtyards. So looking at how kind of the movement network works, so you've got the primary vehicle access to the site is through the secondary street, and then vehicles will be able to use the sort of loop road, and then also you've got this sort of central access which won't have through access for motor vehicles. It will only be sort of bollarded at the centre, so only sort of cyclists and pedestrians will be able to sort of go through that. And there are also sort of segregated sort of pedestrian routes through the site, including through the COPS, and sort of along the key streets. There's also pedestrian and cyclist access proposed to Huntington Road from the north. So there's an existing driveway access to the existing buildings on the site, and that's proposed to be retained as a sort of pedestrian cyclist only link. And there will also be sort of a link through to the Horse Chestnut Avenue on the eastern side of the site. This just illustrates the design of the secondary street. So it's proposes of a sort of central carriageway with a verge either side with some visitor parking, and also sort of refuse underground refuse points. Then segregated pedestrian path on the either side as well, and it's essentially in accordance with the guidance and the design code for the design of secondary streets in Edmonton. The connection through to the west, it runs through the Greenbelt sort of open space, and it has quite a simple design with there's a pinch point worth noting here, which is due to the fact that there's kind of the university's land ownership at this point is quite narrow. So the roadway is supposed to be pinched in to a single lane carriageway with a separate pedestrian path and sort of waiting areas for vehicles. Seen as a positive in some ways, as it will helps sort of slow vehicles down and maintain a sort of a low speed environment. And a pedestrian priority crossing is also be proposed where there's an existing footpath which crosses the site. Looking at the design of the tertiary street, so that's the sort of the northeastern side. This is proposed to be a sort of 5 metre wide sort of shared service to the carriageway, so that's quite a relatively narrow sort of street, just wide enough for 2 vehicles to pass, with sort of plant verges either side, providing sort of an avenue of trees on either side, as well as space for visitor parking and underground refuse points. And then there will be separate pedestrian footpaths on either side of that as well, with then sort of privy strip planting in front of houses and apartments. So the street, while it's a relatively long sort of stretch of street, sort of narrow carriageway, sort of sense of enclosure created by the sort of the avenue of trees, and also changes in surface treatment along the street will serve to reduce vehicle speeds and provide sort of as a low speed environment. So this is one of the green streets. So this has been developed as a way to integrate sort of street level parking into the site in a way which so it won't be a sort of dominant feature. So these are quite wide corridors of so typically sort of 22 metres or more. So you've got a 6 metre carriageway and then sort of perpendicular parking, and the parking is interspaced with planting areas for trees. It's got the advantage that they're located quite centrally, so there's lots of space for them to grow. So you can, the large tree species can be accommodated in these spaces. And then you've got a wide sort of landscape strip, including a pedestrian footpath and features such as swales and planting as well. Just moving on to the COPS area. So the COPS wasn't intended to be sort of retained as part of the outline master plan, but it's been something which the applicant has worked with us to look to retain. And so what's proposed is to retain sort of a number of trees where they're in sort of good condition and have sort of a healthy sort of lifespan still, and then to integrate that into an area of open space which will essentially sort of bleed into the Stories field to the south. The space is also proposed to include a number of other features, including sort of an attenuation basin, a sort of a play area, and sort of seating and a meeting point as well. And as well as sort of pedestrian footpaths. Then moving on to the design of the courtyards. So the houses on here are proposed to have sort of private rear gardens, and then there'll be a sort of central shared sort of area with sort of fairly extensive planting. So these courtyards are fairly wide. So the western one is, I think, typically around sort of 30 metres or more across. So there's a space for a sort of a mix for that kind of those private spaces for the houses to the rear, as well as a sort of a communal sort of garden space. Just moving on to sort of youth and play facilities. So one thing that's sort of changed slightly from the original master plan is that the sort of a play area is proposed where next to Block E, so that's where the junction of the loop road and sort of the secondary street. That's been moved towards the COPS area, as that would be sort of a less sort of trafficked and sort of quieter area, so which is sort of a design change which officers are supportive of. There'll be a sort of formal play area shown in some yellow here, as well as sort of informal play areas, including sort of logs and boulders and so on. That they'll be sort of located around the sort of attenuation basin, as well as sort of in other parts of the COPS, and as well as there'll be a space of seating and this sort of pergola feature. which provides shelter on the eastern end of the copse. In terms of cycle parking, so for the houses along the development edge, cycle parking is proposed to be accommodated in garages or in cycle stores, with the garages sized to be able to accommodate bicycles. For the apartment blocks and the courtyards, cycle parking is proposed to be within sort of shared cycle stores. These have been designed to include little Sheffield stands, and one amendment that's been made through the application has been looking to try and incorporate sort of space for larger cycles and sort of cargo boats and so on. We're looking at that's proposed to be included in the courtyard blocks, with the thinking being that as these contain sort of large units, including three-bedroom houses, there's likely to be more demand for cargo bikes in this area, this part of the site. Yeah, that's one of the amendments that's been made through the application. And then moving into car parking. So again, this is sort of something which has changed quite substantially since the early pre-app. So the sort of initially sort of extensive sort of on-street parking was proposed, but that's evolved quite substantially to what we have today, which is a mix of sort of parking within garages, which is shown in sort of green, primarily along the sort of development edge. Sort of undercroft parking in blocks A, B, and C, and E, and also limited on-street parking, primarily again on those green streets, which I sort of showed earlier in the presentation, where undercroft parking is proposed within these sort of apartment blocks. That it's generally to the sides and rear, with sort of active frontages sort of maintained to these apartment blocks, with some of them having units of ground floor and also having the sort of cycle stores and entrance lobbies fronting onto the stories filled, so those sort of frontages remain active. In relation to servicing, so as with the West of Edmonton, underground bin stores are proposed. So the vast majority of houses are have a bin store within sort of 30 or 50 metres. There's, I believe it's 2 houses which which are slightly further. I believe it's a sort of 70-metre sort of walking distance to the bin store for these houses. The reason for that is that the placement of bin stores, or the underground bins, is dependent on where the refuse vehicle can get access to. So it's limited to the secondary street and this little loop road, and looking to provide sort of closer access for these houses would require sort of significant changes to design, such as moving the road more into the copse, which officers I think would be harmful from an urban design perspective. And it's also worth noting that sort of residents will typically be able to will have a sort of a bin store along their route to go to sort of the shops in the local centre or on their commute to work, so they'll be able to sort of make sort of combine journeys to the bin store with other journeys. So that non-compliance is considered acceptable in this instance. In relation to sustainable design, so the Outline Commission requires houses to be built to Code for Sustainable Homes Level 5. So it's although it's now being withdrawn, it exceeds the requirements of kind of building regulations Part L. A sort of a 100% reduction in target emissions against the baseline. It also includes a requirement to target 80 litres of water use per person per day. site will also be connected to the sort of non-potable water system and the district heating system for the site, and extensive areas of solar photovoltaics are also proposed on the roofs of the buildings. One area we've spent some time looking at carefully considering is overheating and daylighting. So we've looked to eliminate sort of single aspect apartments as far as possible. There's I think 14 proposed across the site. The applicant has undertaken overheating analysis. So for all the houses, they've used the simple methodology under building regulations Part A, and all units past that. And they've also done an analysis of the apartments using dynamic thermal modelling, and that's including a sort of sample of the apartments which have this sort of higher sun exposure, and all units again pass the assessment criteria there. So passive cooling measures are proposed, including sort of low G-value glazing to solar exposed facades, and also use of recessed balconies. And all apartments will also be fitted with mechanical ventilation. There's also a sort of concern around sort of daylighting as well to some of the single aspect apartments. So particularly that's on Block A and Block E, where you've got sort of an internal corner where sort of the west-facing apartments sort of slightly shielded by the other parts of the building. The applicant has amended design of these apartments to sort of essentially elongate them, and the amended design sort of is compliant with BRE daylight guidance. In relation to accessible design, so the outline permission requires that at least 50% of dwellings are built to lifetime home standard. All dwellings across the site are proposed to be built to lifetime home standard, and in addition to that, almost all are proposed to be built to building regulations M42. The exception to that is within blocks F1, 2, and 3. So these are, you can see on this image, circled in red. The reason for that is that these blocks only have a small number of units, so they have 5 units above ground floor, and so the applicant has concerns that installing a lift would add significantly to both the build cost and also the service charge for these units. And so lifts have been omitted, which for these blocks, all other blocks have lift access and are fully compliant with M42. Given that the site is going beyond the requirements of the outline permission, this is considered acceptable by officers. As I mentioned earlier, there's in terms of trees and ecology, there's this existing copse area centrally within the site. This is supposed to be retained in a reduced form with a number of trees which are in good condition and retained. And also there's existing hedging and planting along the northern and western boundaries, which is proposed to be retained, and also the horse chestnut avenue along the eastern side, which again is proposed to be retained, other than where in the future the secondary street will continue through that avenue. Extensive sort of tree planting proposed to compensate for the loss of trees within the site. So that includes sort of hedgerow planting to supplement the existing hedgerow along the northeastern boundary, and extensive tree planting along the secondary street and the loop road, as well as within the courtyard gardens as well. In terms of the drainage strategy, so the site has been designed to be compliant with the site-wide drainage strategy. It includes a number of drainage features, including so there's an attenuation basin, there's swales, rain gardens, and permeable paving and some underground attenuation crates. One issue is that the site-wide drainage strategy will see that sort of, water will in the future will be directed east of the site and then sort of loop round to around the site and then join into the wider site-wide network. Because development to the east of the site hasn't come forward yet, a temporary pumping station is proposed in the sort of the southeast corner of the site until that sort of future development is delivered, and the lead local flood authority is content with the design of that. So the recommendation is to approve the application together with the part approval of a number of conditions sort of listed on the screen here.
Thank you very much, Guy. So what I'm proposing to do is we'll invite the public speakers to speak. I'll then record the running order for questions, and we'll have a half an hour break for lunch. We'll come back and we'll have your member questions. Okay, so thank you for that. So before I turn to the public speakers, may I remind you have 3 minutes to speak, and the committee manager will advise you when you reach the 3 minutes. So could I invite Kim Rickard, Planning Director, and Stephen Trenworth, Land Director, Durkan Homes, please, to speak. See which one it is. Introduce yourself, please.
Yep, thank you, Chair. My name is Jake Lander. I'm the planning agent for this application. So, good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the applicant, Durkan Latimer Group and the University of Cambridge, I'd like to thank members and officers for the opportunity to speak today. The report provided by your officer, as well as today's presentation, are very comprehensive and are the result of a collaborative approach to forming the scheme in front of you today. We thank the officers, design review panel and stakeholders for their contributions, which has led to an improved and exceptional scheme set within compliance to the governing design code. A number of scheme benefits have resulted from this joint working. Firstly, as Guy mentioned, an existing copse of self-sown trees within the site was identified for removal as part of the outline master plan, but we have worked to retain and celebrate these trees and make them a feature of one of the open spaces, forming a key landscape and accessible feature within the scheme. Secondly, street scenes have been carefully considered to design for a lower speed environment, with landscaping and road narrowing combined with clear demarcation between pedestrian, cycle and vehicle routes and accessible parking provision, resulting in a design-led approach, not an engineering-led one. Thirdly, cycle parking provision has been included in accordance with the Area Action Plan's requirements, and two-tier stacked cycle solutions have been omitted from the scheme in favour of ground-level Sheffield stands throughout, alongside provision for cargo bikes. Fourthly, a constant review of the home is to ensure that they receive good levels of light and ventilation to meet and exceed the appropriate and accredited standards that's been undertaken. Finally, the landscaping scheme has been reformed following advice from the design review panel, with larger tree specimens and informal landscaping preferred to strengthen character, legibility and biodiversity benefits over a more formalised and manicured arrangement. In conclusion, the scheme before you is one which we believe represents a high-quality development which aligns with the objectives of the Eddington Master Plan, has no objections from technical consultees, and provides an exemplar residential development through an approach to design, review and enhancement in partnership with key stakeholders. We therefore respectfully request that councillors resolve to approve this application in accordance with officers' recommendations. Stephen Trenworth, representing the applicant, is with me and we'll be happy to respond to any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Is there going to be any other speakers on? No. Okay. Well, thank you for that. Now, can I just record the order of questions that people want to raise, and then we'll adjourn and come back. So I'm going to take you three first. So Levine, Pora, Any others wanting to make a bid? No, I'm sorry, can't speak. Sorry, can't speak. All right. Okay, so we'll adjourn 30 minutes, please. Strictly 30 minutes. Thank you.